EaglefanKarl. We're gathered here today to celebrate the Eagles season that we had and remember it for what it was, and to really reflect back on the greatness that we had and mourn the loss of this fantastic season that is now gone. Are you nuts? What are we getting so upset for? This is ridiculous. We need to calm down. We didn't expect to win every game this season, but there's a lot of Eagle fans that are overreacting to this. And I'm going to sort of hopefully give us a little hope going forward that this loss maybe wasn't as bad as we thought it was. And that's because we really beat ourselves. If you look at the statistics in this game, that's exactly what happened. We beat ourselves. We had more first downs in this game. We had more yardage, both rushing and passing. So it's not like we got a lot of passing yards late and that ended up skewing things. So we had more overall yardage. We had more rushing yardage. We had more passing yardage. We had more first downs. We even won time of possession in this game. So really, if you look at all the statistics that you usually measure things by, the only thing we really lost, which ended up being huge, was turnovers. And that's always going to kill you in the NFL if you're losing the turnover battle, especially against a good team. And we also had too many penalties. We had more penalties than they did. So it was the stupid kind of mistakes that were killing us. Now, I'm not trying to downplay the Seahawks and how good of a team they are. They're a good team. In fact, I didn't say this in my prediction video, but I was really sort of worried about the fact that they were home underdogs and they had lost 2 straight home games, because I was worried that that was going to galvanize them, and it really did. You know, they really showed up, and to their credit, they played a complete game. But that just goes to show they played a complete game. They played pretty much a flawless game, and we still were a couple of mistakes away from beating them. The main reason I had picked the Eagles in this game and not the Seahawks, which was my initial inclination, was to pick the Seahawks to win this game. The reason I picked the Eagles was how well the Eagles have been playing lately, and I assumed that they would continue to play at that high level. They had really not shown that they could potentially have a letdown kind of a game, and this wasn't really a letdown game because the Seahawks are a good team. It's not like the Eagles had a letdown, but I do think the Eagles had a little bit of an attitude of they could show up and win, and they didn't have to necessarily put forth their best effort, and you even saw that the last couple of weeks, especially in the Bears game. There was a lot of mistakes in that Bears game. It was a sloppy game. We won it convincingly anyway because the Bears are a bad team. But I even said at that point, if we continue to play this way against good teams, that's not going to fly. And that's exactly what happened in the Seahawks game. So I was probably a little bit misled in how well we were winning games up to this point, because really it ended up being sort of a bad situation where we played poorly against a good team, and that just caught up, and finally the other team was too good for us to overcome those mistakes. Let's go ahead and take a look at our studs and duds, and it's been a rare thing this season, but a loss, we take a look at the good first and then really focus on what went wrong. So in terms of the good, there's 3 guys that I identified that really had good games. Number 2 and 3 are really going to be for the same reason. I think they both had a really good game. Number 2, I think, was a little better than number 3, but number 3 is going to be Derek Barnett, and number 2 is going to be Brandon Graham. And I think they were having a good game all day, getting pressure on the quarterback. Brandon Graham, I think, was probably the best player on defense we had in this game, and clearly showed that he was at the top of his game for this one. So a lot of credit to those 2 guys for continuing to bring it. I really didn't see any flaws in their game this past week. So for that, they make my studs of the week. But the number 1 stud of the week has got to be the guy that we killed for the game in Seattle last year, and that was Nelson Agholor. And it's really a shame that we ended up losing this game, because it would have been such a great story. You've got a guy that goes out there and absolutely plays horribly last year. That was the game where it just was clear that he had something wrong mentally, that, you know, he was having a sort of a mind block on, you know, what he needed to do to have a good game and really show up, and he was making mental mistakes, and he was clearly in his head. So you have that, and then you fast forward a year. He's playing a lot better this season. He goes out to the scene of the crime last year where it all went poorly and really sort of was the climax of what had been a poor season for him anyway. And he goes out there and has a career game. I mean, he really played real well. He led the team in yardage, and of course he scores the lone touchdown. So it was really a shame that sort of went to waste, because that would have been a great narrative coming out of this game, as you have a guy that had so much of a struggle there last year, comes up and really was the player of the game for the Eagles this week. But of course, a loss means we've got to focus on what went wrong, and there are quite a few duds that I could reference in this. Once again, I'm going to hold myself to the same thing I do with studs on wins. I'm limiting myself to 5. So as a result of that, I do have some dishonorable mentions. The first dishonorable mention is going to be to the refs, and that was just because this game was just horribly officiated. I think that hurt the Eagles more than it hurt the Seahawks, but overall there was some bad calls that went against the Seahawks too. Some of the decisions they made in terms of judgment calls, there was the one where we had the pass interference call against the Seahawks late, where they ended up picking up the flag because they said, well, no, their feet got intertwined. But there was something that happened in the first half that was the exact same thing that happened with us, where they didn't pick up the flag. It was kind of stuff like that that was sort of goofy. It was never consistent. So it was really sort of an uneven game in terms of the officiating. And like I said, I never want to blame them and put them in my actual duds list when we lose a game. I've done it when we've won games, and it was poor. See the Panthers game. But this was a game where I think that the refs really, I think, blew a lot of calls. And for that, they've got to get a dishonorable mention this week. Another dishonorable mention is got to be to Jim Schwartz, our defensive coordinator. There was some adjustments that I don't think he ever really made. There was sort of that one play that they were running. I think it was usually ended up being like a tight end screen where it would sort of come underneath and they would leak out of the backfield. And the guy would usually be open in the flat, and it would usually gain around 6 or 7 yards. And it wasn't, it never really broke for a big play, but they kept running that play to success. They never really shut it down, and as a result, they were always able to run that play, usually like on first down. So they'd be looking at like a 2nd and 3, where they'd have a very favorable situation. So they were never really in, 2nd and 3rd and longs. The other problem I saw with Jim Schwartz was on the big touchdown that they had. Well, it wasn't a touchdown, but it was almost a touchdown to Baldwin. I have no problem with him calling the zero blitz there. I understand why you want to do that. The problem I have with that play call then is if you're going to do that and he's going to have basically one-on-one coverage on the outside, you can't have a safety on a guy like Doug Baldwin. You've got to have a cornerback on him, and the fact that he has McLeod on that coverage, I think is just a blown assignment, and it's a poorly designed blitz. So if you're going to run a play like that, I'd prefer to see the corners in coverage and the safeties being the ones that are doing the blitzing. Let's go ahead and call out some of my actual duds of the week. And my number 5 dud of the week is going to be Alshon Jeffrey. And that's because of the one holding call. The thing is, it wasn't even needed on that particular play. He was going to get the yardage anyway. So you've got a play then that gets wiped out where you're going to have, 1st and goal from like the 1 or 2 yard line, and it ends up getting called back. And we end up having to settle for a field goal on that drive. And you say, okay, well, big deal, then it's only a difference of 4 points. But that difference of 4 points is huge, because then in the third quarter, if you fast forward in the third quarter, if we get a touchdown there instead of a field goal, then it's a very different situation in the second half. And in the third quarter then, when we're in that situation where it's 4th and 3 from the 20-yard line, we can kick a field goal there and get it to a one-score game. So really it sort of killed 2 drives as a result of that because of the way the game played out. My number 4 dud of the week has got to be the quarterback, though, Carson Wentz. He had some real critical mistakes in this game. And the reason he's not higher on this list is for how well he played in the second half. He really played well, ended up having, a great day from a yardage and completion standpoint. The one interception, I'm not even going to kill him on, because at that point you're down by 2 scores. You need to score quickly. So he's just sort of throwing it up there to sort of see if he can get, a quick score. What I am going to kill him on is the fumble and not taking care of that. I think he's trying to do too much on that play. He's trying to get into the end zone. He already had the yardage. Just if you're going down, go down. You've got to protect the ball there. And that's one of those crazy things that last week, the same kind of play happens, but the way the ball bounces, our guy falls on it. This week, our guy has a chance to fall on it. It doesn't quite bounce the right way, and they're able to gain possession of it. But it's just sort of one of those quirky things, and that just goes to show that everything was going right for us in the Bears game, despite the mistakes we were making. Fast forward a week, those same kind of mistakes now really end up biting us. And, that was just another play that is another example of that. But he's got to do a better job of protecting that ball. The other thing I'm going to criticize Carson on is, he misses the pass in the first half to Aguilar where he overthrows him. But there was another pass that he missed to Aguilar later that was actually completed, that it was because it was low, and Aguilar has to go down to the ground to catch it. If he hits him in stride on that, I think Aguilar runs to the end zone on that play. And that's just another example of, where you've got a play that could have been made, that it was an underthrown ball. So he really missed on 2 of those passes, not 1. He missed on 2 of them. It just so happens that Aguilar was able to make a play on the 1, but it wasn't a good enough play because it probably could have gone for a touchdown. My number 3 dud of the week has got to be Michael Kendricks. And Michael Kendricks has been having a really good season this year, but he was just mismatched in coverage this week. And a lot of that has to do, I think, you have to look at the defensive coaching there, is why are you getting him into a situation where he's required to be in coverage so much against guys that he can't cover? And that's really the weakness of Kendricks' game. Kendricks is great against the run, but covering guys out of the backfield is just not a strength of his, and that showed in this game. And as a result, it even ended up costing us a touchdown when they were able to score against him. My number 2 dud, I'm not going to try and say his first name, but it's Vaitai, and it's really just sort of a shame. He's been having such a good season, and he picked a horrible time to have a bad game. And he just looked like a backup left tackle in that game. I think they should have been looking to try and give him more help there, and they weren't. And it was a bad combination of a lot of things going wrong. He's got to be my number 2 dud of the week, because as a result, Carson really, there was a lot of times where he just had a lot too much pressure on him early in plays that he wasn't really able to make the play that probably was there. But my number 1 dud of the week, is there any question? It's got to be Doug Peterson. Doug's been having a great season this year. He's done a lot of good play calling, but his play calling in this game was really suspect. The first half was way too conservative with the play calling. In terms of I'm not even going to really get into the 4th downs. I think that those could be argued one way or the other. The one before half is more egregious than the one that was in the first quarter. But I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking more about the fact that you've got a team with a banged up secondary, and you're doing all these dink and dunk passes and never really challenging them downfield. Now, maybe that was because Vaitai was struggling, but if that's the case, then get Selleck out there to help it with him with pass blocking, to double team that guy on the end and still try and challenge this team downfield. The other thing that I really have to criticize him for is that run pass option play is just it's got to get used much less. I have no problem with it being in the playbook, but they rely on it far too much, and it's a bad play in the sense that the linemen never really know exactly what's going to happen with it. They have to prepare for run blocking, and the running back isn't sure if he's getting the ball or not, and it just sort of creates a little bit of hesitation, and as a result, the defense has time to react. And whenever, the one advantage the offense always has against the defense is the offense knows where it's going and knows what it's doing before the defense does. The defense has to react as a result. So when you have a play like this, when you've got a play where there is a little bit of hesitation on the offensive side, it sort of negates that advantage. But it just sort of is a play that I think has got to get not retired completely, but certainly scaled way back. And then, of course, the other problem I've got is the issue with the illegal forward pass and not challenging it. And it was clear from the replays it was an illegal forward pass. And I've got to admit, when I first saw it live, I'm like, oh, no, that's legal. The problem is when it happens in quick time, in real time, it looks legal. And it looked legal to everyone. It looked legal to me when I first saw it, and clearly it looked legal to Doug. Doug was asked about it yesterday in his day after press conference, and he says, well, it was a situation where, it had to be a quick decision made. The problem I have with that is, if you were watching the broadcast, Al and Chris, after they ran the replay, said, they've got to challenge that. That's clearly a forward pass. So if you're seeing that in real time, and you're seeing the replays in real time, and if you're listening to the broadcast in real time, then you should have known to challenge that play. So I don't buy that argument. I don't know what their coaches do in the booth in terms of reviewing plays. Personally, if I were a head coach, I would have 2 guys assigned for replays. One that's just sort of watching things in general, and another guy, all he's responsible to do is watch the TV broadcast. Listen to what the announcers are saying and watch the broadcast to find things like that might get missed if you're not really paying attention. Because that was probably a play that I wouldn't have even necessarily thought to challenge when it first happened. But when I saw it on replay, I was like, wait a second, that ball does go forward. So that's a situation where you just got to know that you've got to have a guy that's what he's designated to do, to really look for that type of stuff and watch the actual TV broadcast, because if you miss something like that that's clear on a TV broadcast, you know you're going to get killed for it the next day, and it's an easy solution. You just have one guy that's his responsibility, is to watch the TV broadcast for stuff like that. And it might only happen once in a season, but the problem you've got with it is that is a critical play in that game. If that play gets overturned, it's now 4th down for the Seahawks. They've got to punt the ball back to us. And with the momentum we had just scored on the drive before. We've got it down to a 1-touchdown game. With the momentum we had, we very well could have taken the ball down then and tied that game up. Seahawks then, of course, go ahead and take that ball in and score and go back up by 2 touchdowns. And it really just changes the whole dynamics of that game that might have played out very differently. It would have been very interesting to see how the last 7 minutes of that game play out if we do challenge that. And, of course, we would have been successful had we challenged it. This is a play that it was clear they were going to win that challenge. And you've got to have a guy that basically is screaming into Doug's ears, you know what? You might not think it, but this is one we've got to challenge. Trust me on this. Take the chance. Let's do it, because this is a huge play. All in all, though, I've got to say that this is really a game that I would never like a loss, but I think the Eagles needed to have some sort of a loss on their schedule like this kind of a loss. If they respond well to this and are able to sort of bounce back, that I think it does show that we do have a Super Bowl caliber team here. So I really am anxious to see exactly how well this team bounces back from this loss. And that, of course, now sets up huge for this week coming up to the game against the Rams this Sunday. You've lost your edge in the NFC. You're now tied with the Vikings at 10-2 for the top position. The Vikings, because of strength of schedule, have a little bit of an advantage. But a lot of that could get sorted out in the next few weeks, especially if the Eagles are able to take care of their own business. The Vikings do have a couple tough games down the rest of their schedule, so they could potentially lose 1 or 2 games. So if the Eagles do take care of business, I still think they end up as the number 1 seed. But that starts this week. They've got to win the game this week against the Rams. I had said that I think the Eagles probably go 1-1 in this trip. I had thought that they would win the Seahawks game and lose the Rams game. But now it really makes this Rams game all that more important. Let me know in the comments below what you think, though. Do you think we need to be sounding the alarm and things are going crazy? Are you a little bit more like me and a little more measured and say, you know what, take a deep breath, relax a little bit. The season's not over. We still can come back from this. Really, the Eagles were the better team the other night. They just beat themselves and made a lot of mistakes. Or like I said, are you the first part that basically says, abandon ship, this thing's going horribly wrong, they're not going to win another game the rest of the year? Also, let me know what you think of my studs and duds. Do you agree with me on the duds of the week? Or would you have put Carson higher on the list, despite the fact the way he played in the second half? Would you give Doug a pass for some of the things he did? And did I miss any studs? Guys that had great games that maybe I overlooked because of the loss? Let me know in the comments below what you think. Like I said, I'll go ahead, as always, check in before the Rams game, give you my prediction for that. Until then, fly Eagles fly.